Hey guys, this is Comic Uno and Comic Frontline, and today I'm doing Comic Uno episode 214, and this show where I review all the comics I read this week in one show. So let's get started. I have a pretty average week this week, and that was 19 books. So we're going worst pick of the week to best pick of the week, and again, everything in between. So what was worst pick of the week? What was number 19 for me this week? And that was Harley and Ivy Meet Betty and Veronica issue 2. Now, I'm very disappointed to say this is so low, because this is one of my most anticipated books for the year. I was very excited for this one. Issue 1 was a bit of a disappointment, but issue 2 was a big disappointment because most of the issue is Harley, Ivy, and Betty and Veronica, and really the whole Riverdale crew in this costume party. Everyone's dressed up as different people. It gets super confusing as you're reading it. It's like, alright, wait, that's Harley, that's Betty, and even though obviously you know what costumes are, at least the leads are wearing, it just is more of an effort to really enjoy the issue just because it feels so chaotic and confusing because of the art style and even just the framing of this comic. I just don't think this was a really great theme to do for the issue. Hopefully we will get a better issue after this now that the costume party's over, but it gets even more confusing now that Betty and Veronica have switched bodies with Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy. So I wasn't a big fan of this. There are small moments I enjoyed of the issue, like Sabrina and Zatanna teaming up with each other. Everyone loving Josie and the Pussycats was a lot of fun, but those are very small moments in a very chaotic issue. So Harley and Ivy Meets Betty and Veronica issue 2 gets 2 stars, and that is my worst pick of the week at number 19. Moving on to number 18, a book I gave a try, and that is the Jetsons issue 1. Just not my thing. I think they try to set up the world a little bit too much, and you don't get enough from the characters and enough of a hook for you to want to continue. Now, obviously, this is a darker side of the Jetsons. It's seeing that there's this world that's been destroyed, and I guess they have to figure out more about that world. It's definitely based a bit more on science and science fiction, which I guess makes sense for a Jetsons comic. But yeah, just a lot darker than I expected and not enough of the family. It's all the family doing their own thing, and that's, you know, the Jetsons interacting with each other is what made the show. So I was disappointed that they're all separated in this issue. So the Jetsons issue 1 gets 2.5 stars. Not bad, but definitely didn't give me enough to want to pick up the next issue. Now moving on to number 17, which is Green Lanterns issue 34. Disappointed to see this so low, but I feel like there is just way too much going on in this issue where we get to see them, you know, in space doing their adventures there. You have Jessica trying to get a job. You have Simon trying to get a job. It was just trying to juggle so much that when you were enjoying one story, it kind of flashed to another one where you just couldn't really settle in for the ride. So Green Lanterns issue 34 gets 2.5 stars. So far I haven't been loving Tim Seeley's run on Green Lanterns, but we'll see where it goes. Now moving on to the next issue, which is number 16, which is Spider-Man issue 234. Now Spider-Man is a book I haven't been enjoying as much as I wanted to. I love Miles, but I just don't really love the direction of this book, and it's just such a slow burn with this issue. It's pretty much this whole subplot romance thing going on that Bombshell loves Miles and he didn't notice it, but he likes someone else. And then in the background, it is the Sinister Six building up. And the person who is the Iron Spider is pretty obvious who it was, so it wasn't much of a shocker when we found out, you know, who the character was. So that was a bit disappointing. There just wasn't anything I'm excited about with this book. I mean, the artwork is solid, but I just want to feel more attached to the book than I actually do, even though I am attached to these characters already. It doesn't take much to feel attached, but there's just not a lot of interesting story going on for me right now. So Spider-Man is number 16, and I gave that 2.5 stars. Now moving on to number 15, which is Darth Vader issue 7. Now this is a fun issue. If you just like Darth Vader being big and bad, that's what we get to see here. You get to see what lines he will cross, and Also, him having to team up with an unexpected person. Now, I will say this kind of digs deeper into the Star Wars mythos, so if you're a huge Star Wars fan, I think you're going to really like this. But I'm more of a casual Star Wars fan, so it's maybe a little bit too much information about the world that took me out of it, but it's still an interesting Darth Vader issue, and I do like the characterization of the character. So I'm going to give this 3 stars, and that's number 15. Moving on to number 14, which is Black Lightning, Cold Dead Hands, issue 1, which was a bit formulaic, honestly. I wanted a little bit, and I keep saying this, a little bit more to latch onto here. I think the one thing I really liked was our main character, Black Lightning's relationship, you know, Pierce's relationship with his detective friend. I'm like, oh cool, they had a past and somehow she knows that he's Black Lightning. That's cool, I guess. But everything else surrounding it felt very formulaic, things we've seen before. And this is someone who I really haven't read Black Lightning, and it just feels like, you know, just in general, superhero stories we've seen before. So, I wanted a little bit more from this to make it stand out a bit. I don't know if I'll get issue 2, but I did like the artwork. I thought that was pretty solid. So Black Lightning issue 1 gets 3 stars. Moving on to number 13, and that is Captain America, issue 695. Now, I think people are definitely going to be torn with this. I think if you're a huge Captain America fan, old school Captain America fan, you're going to like it. It goes back to basics of who Captain America is. Now, if you like Nick Spencer's run, you definitely won't like this, because it kind of forgets all of what happened in Secret Empire. Now, for me, I'm not a Captain America fan at all. I really only tried this out because I am a Mark Waid and Chris Samnee fan, and I didn't like Daredevil before I read their run, and I ended up liking Daredevil because of it. So I'm like, alright, if any creative team is going to get me to like Captain America, it will be this creative team. But I feel like it just kind of went with the motions. It's everything we know about Captain America is kind of generic in that way, and I understand it's supposed to go back to basics, but where's the hook? Where's, you know, the whole reason the Nick Spencer stuff happened was because they wanted to do something different with Captain America. So I want to see something a little different. Obviously not out of character, not in the way Nick Spencer did stuff, but just give me something. And this is, you know, to the books a little bit too much. So Captain America issue 695 for me gets 3 stars. Don't know if I'll get the next issue. Moving on to number, let's see, we're up to number 12, which is Deathstroke issue 25. Now, the parts I really liked was actually looking into Slade's past and learning more about his past. I thought that was interesting. The society stuff, I could care less about. The dialogue, I was not interested in with what they were saying, but I did like the flashbacks, and now that our Deathstroke team, the Defiants, have to go and save Deathstroke, I think is interesting. So overall, I gave this 3.5 stars. Definitely some good stuff here to read, but not mind-blowing, and there's definitely some boring parts with this issue too. So Deathstroke issue 25 gets 3.5 stars. Now moving on to number 11, which is Crosswind issue 5. You know, the stuff that I love about this book is just seeing our characters grow outside of their bodies, in each other's bodies, Kaysen and Juniper. And that continues. You get to see them grow, but not take away anything of their personality. Their weaknesses become their strengths. But thing I didn't like about this issue was the heavy-handed explaining mythology of how this is all happening. It was so mystic, it takes away from the human side of this book and more the character-driven side of this book. So I gave this one 3.5 stars. This is the penultimate issue, so we'll see how this one ends. Now, moving on to number 10, which is Bettie Page, issue 4, a book I've been having a lot of fun with. It's Bettie Page, you know, pinup model, turned secret spy, you know, it's a lot of fun. I really like her dialogue here. She's snappy, and they even make fun of that the villain's very mustache twirling, explaining his storyline, or, you know, his villain plan, and Betty's like, alright, I know this is really cliche, but the reason it's cliche is because this has always happened in the 50s. It always happens, so that's why it's so cliche. So yeah, it's just a lot of cool Bettie Page snark. The actual plot is not that deep, but I do like the characterization. So Bettie Page issue 4 gets 3.5 stars. Now moving on to number 9, which is Injustice 2, issue 13. Now, this probably would be higher if it's a normal artist who did it. I'm not saying the art's bad, it's just a bit more thinner line work, so it's not as, I don't want to say detailed, because it is still detailed art. It just feels like a different tone. I do like kind of the bolder look that we've been seeing with Injustice, kind of meeting, I feel like, a video game aesthetic. So, but I did like this issue. It is Supergirl and Damian teaming up and kind of learning more about each other and trying to figure out what place they have in this war, especially Supergirl, because she's just new to this Earth in general, and Damian just trying to figure out his own alliance and if he's a good person or not. So it was a fun issue, and it's cool to kind of leave Batman's side and dig in deeper into other characters. So Justice 2 issue 13 gets 3.5 stars. Moving on to number 8, which is... Number 8 is Superman issue 34, and definitely the best parts of this issue being Lois. Lois pretty much joining the Furies, joining, you know, Grandma Goodness, whatever her name is, Grandma, what the hell is her name? Blanking out on it. I think it's Grandma Goodness. You know, the head of the Furies. Let me see if I can get her name. Come on, Grandma. Whatever, head of the Furies. It's cool that Lois was teaming up with them and kind of earned her spot in this issue. So I love the Lois stuff. She's even eating unknown meat just for the sake of her family. Other stuff were a little slower. Superman's side with Lex Luthor, you know, we've seen Superman saving Lex Luthor like every issue. And then the John stuff were very small. It was a cliffhanger of him kind of just running away. But definitely the Lois stuff being the strongest of this issue. So Superman issue 34 gets 3.5 stars. And that's number 8. Moving on to number 7. Which is probably one of the higher ones of the Metal One-Shots, and that is Batman the Devastator, issue 1. Now, one thing I will say is that it's kind of weird to figure out which world this is set in, because it's in the New 52, the Doomsday virus stuff going on, but it's also Lois from the Rebirth era, because we see that she has John, so that gets a little confusing on what world they're talking about, but the actual use of the Doomsday virus was interesting. I think Batman had a little bit better motive here than other storylines, so overall I thought it was fun, even if you kind of have to have some suspension of disbelief to understand where this actually takes place. But Batman the Devastator issue 1 gets 4 stars, even though I thought it was supposed to be a Green Arrow book because of the symbol, but it is Superman related. Moving on to number 6, which is Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man, issue 6. Now, this is probably the highest I've had this book in a long time. But there's some really good emotions in this issue, and the artwork has improved. It kind of goes back to a simpler time of old school Spider-Man, which I think fits really well for this book. But, you know, I enjoyed this issue because it's J. Jonah Jameson and Spider-Man having a heart-to-heart, and something big happens. Spider-Man / Peter Parker reveals that he's Peter Parker after J. Jonah Jameson, you know, breaks down. And you kind of understand why J. Jonah Jameson didn't like Spider-Man, and they discuss it. Even if some of the dialogue is very repetitive of what they're saying, which is why I couldn't put this higher, and there's some exposition about Spider-Man's sister. Other than that, there is some really good emotions here, and definitely gets me more excited and attached to the series, because previously I felt like it didn't have a direction, but at least finally it has more of a plot going on in this book. So Peter Parker, issue 6, gets 4 stars, and that is number 6. Now moving on to number 5. Number 5 is Batman White Knight issue 2. Now, issue 1 was better. I think it had some better structure. Some of this issue is a bit clunky, where you have this random Batman scene of him trying to help Mr. Freeze. It gets a little confusing when there's one Harley Quinn introduced and you realize it's not actually Harley Quinn, even though I think it ended up working for the issue by the end. But the things I really liked about this issue was the Joker, him actually trying to redeem himself with Harley Quinn, and seeing Harley and the Joker as equals by the end, where Harley explains why she left and Joker understanding and actually have compassion for Harley Quinn. And we see the villains becoming the heroes of the story, which is exactly what this title is about. But we also have some familiarity in this book too, even though it is this Elseworld and totally different storyline with the Joker. We do have the past with Jason Todd, and, you know, the the death of Robin. So I thought that was very interesting. So overall, I've been enjoying this series a lot, and I'm going to give Batman White Knight issue 2 4 stars. And that was number 5. Moving on to number 4, a little lower than this, usually what this book is, and that is Paper Girls, issue 17. Now, I will say a lot of this issue is just kind of explaining what the world of Paper Girls is, which is totally needed, but it's a bit of an information dump in the issue, where we learn about the Time Travelers' War, and how they kind of got stuck in between all this, and who is the good people and who are the bad people. So, I liked it. It just, again, was a bit of information dump. But what saves this issue is the character moments. We do get to see Tiffany meet her future husband. It looks like, I think it's her husband. The way the art's drawn, the character did look a bit feminine. So at first glance, I thought it was a girl. But I do believe it's her husband in the end of the issue. And then also you kind of have a heart-to-heart with KJ and Mac, where KJ finally reveals her sexuality to Mac and everything that's been building up from the previous arc, and Mac being shocked and not knowing what to say. So I'm very interested to see where that goes. I'm excited to see where their relationship is going to go in general. So those small character moments really do make the issue. The turnaround that Charlotte, the old woman in this issue has, was pretty interesting. So Paper Girls issue 17 gets 4 stars for me. Moving on to number 3, which is Power Pack, issue 63. Now, this book I really wanted to have higher, but I couldn't get there because it was only a Katie Power book, and none of the other Power Pack were really involved in this issue. But I still had a fun time with it. It was a cool throwback to the original Power Pack ongoing. It was a nice, subtle storyline about how Katie misses her family and misses being a superhero. Overall, I like the structure of how she used this essay to explain about her superhero past, even though I think the teacher totally should have known that she was a superhero after all the information Katie gave her, but still, suspension of disbelief in the issue. But overall, I did have a fun time with it. The artwork is so nostalgic. It meets the modern age of Marvel, but still keeps the roots of what we had with the Power Pack ongoing, so I like that. And hopefully we can get more Power Pack. I do hope that, because if this is just a one-shot / 0 issue, I'm okay with it. It was a good build-up for an ongoing, but if it's just a one-shot and we don't get an ongoing, it's going to be disappointing to see that we didn't get to see any of the other Power Pack members. So Power Pack issue 63 gets a solid 4 stars for me. Moving on to number 2, which is Archie, issue 25. And I really enjoyed this issue, seeing some Bughead, for you Riverdale fans, but seeing Betty and Jughead interacting and showing their friendship, and how even in the past Betty really went the extra mile to understand Jughead when he was going through some hardships. And I really enjoyed that moment where she makes the Jughead beanie to sit next to Jughead and see, I am going the extra mile for you. And Jughead goes the extra mile for Betty to try to have Archie and Betty interact with each other and have them talk. They finally do, but then Mark Waid kind of makes this dramatic scene where Betty is talking about the she and say, oh, well, she can't know that we're doing this. I'm guessing Betty's talking about her mother when she does that, but it's just a really weird scene to add drama when Veronica overhears stuff. And I don't love that aspect, because I think this series has done a really good job at avoiding the love triangle thing with still having Veronica and Betty like Archie. And also the artwork is a bit simplistic, but overall I did enjoy the issue for the Betty and Jughead moments and the emotion we do end up getting with this issue, and still dealing with Betty's disability and the effects of her accident. So Archie issue 25 gets 4 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to number 1, my pick of the week is Batman issue 34. Now, I just had a fun time with this issue. It's Catwoman and Batman teaming up and having to go up against Talia al Ghul, and Catwoman being a little jealous, saying, oh, this is your ex? And Batman's like, well, she is the most dangerous person in the world. And Catwoman's like, no, I think I am, and you're gonna learn that. So we get to see in the end that Talia wants to battle Batman. Batman, for some reason, is easily defeated or put down, and there's a sword in his back, and Talia says, well, do you have sword, Catwoman? And Catwoman takes the sword out of Batman's back and says, hell yeah, and they start fighting. Oh, well, she says meow, but still. So there's just a lot of fun moments between Catwoman and Batman that, you know, just shows the feistiness of Catwoman, the sassiness. And also a cool moment with Damian where, you know, he's got a monkey in the middle where this is his parents, he doesn't really know what to do, and Dick Grayson's there to comfort him. And there is this fun moment between him and Superman where he says, I'm gonna kill you, Superman. Superman's like, I don't think my son will like that, your best friend. And Damian's like, alright, whatever. So I enjoyed that moment. So Batman issue 34 gets 4.5 stars, and that is my pick of the week. That is my number 1. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. Don't forget to like my Facebook page. Also, description below, there are links for my comic book, Like Father, Like Daughter. And don't forget to like the Facebook page of Like Father, Like Daughter. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.